Durga sir.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. To, Before I begin, I want to express my deep sense of thanks to Javier, who has very kindly accepted our invitation and is with us. Well, Javier hardly needs an introduction in this group, and for that matter, in a Krishnamurti group anywhere in the world. He has he has spent almost his entire life uh, in the teachings of Krishnaji, and close to 5 decades with all seriousness right from his childhood time when he was a teenager. He went to Brockwood Park School. And then, in one way or the other, he has been associated with the teachings. He was born in Spain but is settled in the Netherlands. He lives in Amsterdam, where he runs a regular course. He writes. He's editor of the Brohes newsletter and also contributes a lot to the link. It's our privilege to welcome Javier, and he has been speaking to this group, quite regularly, for which we are really, really grateful. And today, Javier is going to talk to us on the roots of conflict. With these words of welcome, I again uh, extend a very warm welcome to Javier and request him to begin his talk. Javier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dubey. And thanks to all of you for the invitation. It's always a joy to share with you in all of this. We're all together in this journey. Certainly, it's a human journey. Krishnamurti has opened up this incredible, wide and deep vista, panorama, perspective on our human condition. And as far as I'm concerned, Krishnamurti's teachings are really a great education for all mankind. But we have to do our work, of course. We have to be good, diligent students, and of course, not just of his work, but of his work as a mirror in which we can see our own existence. And curiously enough, that mirror of his that he presents begins indeed with this whole question of conflict. When he talked about reading the book of life, reading the book of humanity, which is really the book of human consciousness, the first chapter that he describes is the chapter on conflict. Now, you would expect maybe from a religious person like Krishnamurti was to start with a chapter on peace and transformation, just transcendence, the great glory of that atheist God that someone was mentioning just earlier before we started recording this meeting. But no, because the journey of wholeness begins with the awareness of what is and ends with the awareness of what is. And mankind somehow has developed along its evolutionary way this pattern of persistent division and conflict. That is a major issue because wholeness, goodness means no division. So we start, in fact, from kind of the opposite pole of that quest for peace, for wholeness, for the encounter with the sacred in which the true meaning of existence resides. So that is really a major issue, that humanity has evolved in this pattern of division and conflict. I don't think we need much reminding of the fact that that phenomenon is very widespread. I mean, we are all at the moment, for example, but this is not unique. It has been happening generation after generation. We see how the amazing degree of tolerance, of acceptance of conflict and violence that's going on in the world at the highest political levels. And I cannot help but mention the most atrocious genocide being committed in Gaza by the Israeli IDF forces. There we have, if we care to look and you care to investigate, we have a very good example of the kinds of patterns that lie behind the general phenomenon of conflict. which is division of all sorts. As you know very well, Krishnamurti always said that the key to understanding conflict is that there is a law to it. There is something in the structure. That where there is division, there is conflict. For him, that was a law. I think that's the only law that he ever formulated. So I called it Krishnamurti's law, which is that where there is division, there is conflict. Now that sounds very general, very, yeah, what kind of division, what kind of conflict? You know, there's division between me and the chair. So we start arguing naturally about it. This is mostly psychological division, right? That there is this question of separation between one person and another. This has been known since ancient times, right? I remember reading something of Plato's, which was 2,400 years ago, roughly, saying that humanity is in a condition of war, of every man against every man, and of each man with himself, against himself. So we have been aware of this general condition of fragmentation that has been plaguing mankind. They were already aware of it many thousands of years ago, that this division is the fundamental source of conflict. But we haven't learned very much. Even though we know that division is the factor, we seem to be unable to stop dividing. So that's one of the challenges that we have to face. It's not enough to know that division is the source of conflict. That where there is division, there must be conflict. This is per se necessary. That's what I think Kay means by saying that it is a law, that it naturally follows that there is division, there's necessarily conflict. And conflict, of course, can be simply a difference of opinion, a disagreement, a moment of reaction, or it can be war, right? It can have different scales of manifestation. What we see, that's why I mentioned this case of the Middle East right now, which is an appalling indictment of our human condition, that we're still accepting killing. And of course, the other war in Ukraine, but war everywhere, you see, of every single conflict in a smaller or larger scale, inwardly as well as outwardly. But this massive scale is there, right? And as Krishnamurti used to say, war is the bloody and spectacular expression of our daily lives. So there's no separating these periodic outbursts of violence and conflict and destruction with the tremendous suffering that they entail, that they imply, and we're seeing it daily. And people are not doing anything to stop it. There's a general silence about it. It's unbelievable. I mean, I find myself in deep pain every day on account of this situation, because it means that we are not feeling, we have no compassion, we have no intelligence either. And while we understand the law of division creates conflict, we cannot stop division. So we have to go further. We're going to uncover the root of conflict. This is not enough. We have to go deeper than this law. That just explains the phenomenon, but it doesn't explain the origin, which is division. What is this division? Well, how does it arise? How are there Jews and Palestinians? How are there Muslims and Hindus? How are there Catholics and Protestants? Why are there these divisions of race, ideology, religion, and all the rest of it? What's so important about it? How come this is so persistent at every single level? The tribal mentality of mankind is one factor. Why has that become so entrenched in us? Is it really so? Are we tribal entities? Must we necessarily be? Is that a conditioning that we can be free from? If we see the calamities that entails, the daily dose of violence that we are served in our daily lives and we are responsible for, isn't there an intelligent way to put an end to it? And what does it imply? So that's a major, major issue which applies to all of us, collectively as well as individually. I don't think there's a single person in the world who is not involved in this. It's universal. And it's been so from the beginning. Now, some friends of mine, they say, all right, this philosophy is very nice, but you know, we're animals. You say, well, I refuse to be an animal. But I can say, oh, you can refuse, but you're still an animal. So, all right, I'm an animal. Now, what does that mean? Now, he said, all right, look at the monkeys, right? You're a monkey. So we're monkeys. We're sophisticated monkeys. So he said, all right, look, you have the animal background. You were talking about the evolution of mankind. This is where you trace it. And you realize that the animal is tribal, right? How does the animal organization, the animal organization is very simple. In the monkey world anyway, there's a little tribe, group of males and females, and they have their territory on which they depend for survival. Within this tribe itself, there's a hierarchy. There is a top monkey, and then there's subordinate monkeys, right? And that top monkey, of course, has the responsibility to watch out for the safety and prosperity of the tribe. But there are other tribes which want the same territory, so there's competition for territory, for the females, and for hierarchy, both within the group and with other groups. So violence, they had to fight. They fight over it. They fight over the territory. They fight over power. They fight over the females. What is mankind doing? What are we human beings doing but doing the same? So my friends say, we are just monkeys. Forget it. Now, if a monkey can say we're just monkeys, maybe we're a bit more than monkeys. That's what I tend to reply, though I can't be sure that that is quite a full answer, right? So this is what this general perspective is from the theory of evolution, that we have developed this conflictive, violent nature, this separateness, because it is intrinsic to survival. That's the organization of survival. And survival supposedly is intelligent, supposedly. Therefore, why should we complain about mankind dividing itself into different groups for the search for survival? Because that's just inbuilt into the biological nature. So why would you argue even at all with survival, with violence, with conflict, with division? Division is inevitable in that kind of organization. Now, is it? Maybe mankind has other ways of looking at it, that we don't have to be so tribal, that in fact, the tribal mentality is a contradiction in terms of survival. This is what we're seeing. This is what we saw a long time ago, that we could cooperate instead of entering into war. We could have said, we all have these needs, let's get together, let's find the right way to deal with these matters. Right, okay, we all need food, clothes, and shelter. No problem. Let's see, if you don't have food, clothes, and shelter, and we have them, then we share them with you. And the same, likewise, next time when you have them and we don't, right? From each according to his capacities, to each according to his needs. We could make that kind of structure instead of, no, this is mine and that is yours. This is the line and you don't cross it. So we could have done differently, and we still need to do differently. We're now coming to a point in which is very clear that none of us can exist separately. And in fact, Krishnamurti always said, life is relationship. There is no life in isolation. But you see, the tribal mentality thinks that security lies in isolation. And in fact, security is the key, perhaps one of the keys to understanding how this has come about. The tribe seeks security. But is there security in division? Since division creates conflict, isn't conflict the ending of security? Look at it. The Israelis, they look at the issue. Maybe that is an example that I refer to because it's on a grand scale and perhaps it can be seen more clearly. The Jewish people had their own country ages ago. They were the developers of this monotheistic religion. They had a very strong sense of their separate identity as the chosen people of God. I'm not sure he was God, was an atheist at the time. I think he believed in himself too much. So never mind. That's a joke that maybe some people wouldn't appreciate. But never mind. They developed this monotheistic religion. They were a bit peculiar in that regard in their time because it was polytheistic and so on. They had a very strong sense of identity. This is a part of the problem. Everybody develops their identity, and that's what wants to survive at the cost of cooperation. Right? So they were eventually in a lot of wars, and eventually the Romans, who were the power of the time, they blasted the whole Jewish community there, destroyed their temple and threw them out into the world, scattered them all over the world. So they didn't have a land. Interestingly enough, they persisted as an identity, an ethnic identity as that, because they traced their ascendancy through their mothers and so on. You had to be part of the biological descent in order to be Jewish. I mean, though you can convert, but generally it's actually a race, right? So there's a race and God, chosen people in a biological line of descent. So that's already a lot of divisions come through that, right? You believe, you don't believe, you are part of this family or not part of this family. So there are divisions already along the lines. Now, they managed to survive as an identity because they had a book. They're the people of the book. They have this book and they maintain this identity through this book, which traces their history, but above all, maintains supposedly a connection with the sacred. That's what the book supposedly says. There was Moses, he talked to him up in the mountain, and then he came down with his laws, and this is what we tried to do. Not very well, but okay, we try. Then these people are persecuted wherever they are, partly because they are also separate and they can't quite fuse with the society in which they are, but also because we have an awful psychological structure of scapegoating. When a problem exists in society, society picks up on somebody who's somewhat slightly alien to that society and blames them for all their troubles. So the poor Jewish people have been the scapegoats of Western countries, Spain, England, France, Germany, finally Germany, with the horrors of the Holocaust. So what do they think of doing, the Jewish people? We need our own country. We need our own land. So they go and pick up on Israel, on Palestine. And they have a motto, they're a land without a people for a people without a land, which turns out to be a lie because there were people there. But they want to create a Jewish state, not just a state where they can live in peace with other people, but their own exclusive Jewish state. You see, there we go. So they go and what do? They expel the Palestinians from their land, destroy their villages, erase them to the ground, take over their land, take over their houses, blow their houses up, push them to other places, and basically commit ethnic cleansing. This is very simple. It's documented. I'm not inventing anything. I'm not projecting anything on these people. God forbid. So then they have to maintain that difference, you see. They had to make an act of violence as founding the place where you're going to find your own security is already an undermining of your own security, because that which you have expelled is always pushing back to return. They deny them the right of return. They push them into this place, into the West Bank and into Gaza, which is a concentration camp, and then they blast them. These people react, and then they blast them with all the power that they have. There is no end to that problem as long as there are Jews and Palestinians, as long as these people maintain an exclusive identity. So one of the factors of division is this identity. But what is this identity seeking? Is seeking security. Now, wait a minute. You see, we don't see the contradiction. If you seek security in separateness, you create conflict and you undermine your security. You cannot maintain your moral superiority when you're butchering other people day in, day out. You cannot. It's a denial of your own moral stance. This is the problem with these separate groups, no matter how spiritual, religious, ancient, or modern they are. And not just that, but you can see further that they seek security in the recovery of an identity, and the identity is exclusively based on the past. The past as identity is the factor of division. The past as identity is a factor of division and the destruction of the living, because it destroys relationship. This is where it's at. So we have a deeper issue in the search for security in separate identity. Krishnamurti says it's images that cause this division. He pushes it to that level. What is the cause of division? He says the search for security in images. Now, he said that a bit he stated it clearly in the core of the teaching. Second paragraph, I read just the first part. It says, man has built in himself images as a fence of security, religious, political, personal. These manifest as symbols, ideas, beliefs. The burden of these images dominates man's thinking, his relationships, and his daily life. These images are the causes of our problems, for they divide man from man. So I'll read it again so that it sinks in, which is, man has built in himself images as a fence of security. He calls it a fence. So to see the borders of the countries, those are fences. Religious, so belief, political, personal as well. These manifest as symbols. Every country has a flag. Ideas and beliefs. The burden of these images dominates man's thinking. The burden, it's a burden, dominates man's thinking, his relationships, and his daily life. These images are the causes of our problems, for they divide man from man. So, following from the law that where there is division, there must be conflict, and that division is coming from these images, then we had to ask ourselves, are we seeking security in images? And can they be found? So what he describes is the contradiction I was just mentioning, that seeking security in images which separate and divide is a contradiction. There is no security in seeking in images because they divide. It's a simple observation, right? So the question behind that is the question of security. So behind the image, the motivation is security. Is there security? Where is there security? Okay, always ask this question. Now, the animal wants security. He said, I'm going to find it here. And to provide security, I must be ready to fight. This is why every country has an army. That those are called the security forces. You realize this is how it works. You see how the monkey still persists? It's the security forces. Or the defense forces, some countries call it. The IDF is the defense forces. Yeah, but look at it. They're not defending anything. They're attacking, right? There's a Krishnamurti used to say also, there is no defense force. There's only an attacking force. It's all violence, right, at the end of the day. So you can try to cover up the real nature of what it is. So every country is armed in the name of security because they are insecure on account of the division that the country itself signifies. We're in a total contradiction with ourselves, and even the people, the leaders, the highest intelligence, supposedly of the countries, are not getting around it. But behind it, like I said, according to Gay, lies this search for security. Not only physical security, like the monkey, but psychological security in identity. So that's a different matter. In the image, right, which we see creates conflict internally in every nation and group, as well as externally with other groups, right? And that can go even for religion. Look at it. Religion is supposedly the human quest for wholeness, for goodness, for liberation, for the encounter with that which is sacred, in which, of course, there is no division, there is no hatred. And yet the religion itself becomes a source of hatred, which is another contradiction. So religion is out of the window as that method of identity, or that ground of identity, is also out of the window. We can't be Hindus We can't be Muslims. We can't be Jews, Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants, Baptists, or Mennonites. I don't know what. All these little labels. What the dickens are we doing? So, you see, when it comes down to it, when you start questioning division, you have to begin to erase these maps, start erasing these boundaries, these fences, false fences of security. You know, there was this American poet, Robert Frost. He was a bit cynical, I think, and he said, you know, good fences make good neighbors. Which is a very cynical thing, right? Because there's no relationship, but the good fence makes good neighbors, right? Whereas there's no relationship because there is a fence. And that's how our relationships actually are, right? They are just fences. And we relate through the image, right? He said, well, if you relate to your wife with an image, and she relates to you with an image, you are not relating. The images are having a relationship, but actually the image will shift. The image is not actual. The image is the memory. Time comes into the picture, and time is the basic factor of division. See how subtle K gets in terms of understanding what separates us. What separates us is the past. The past that comes in and takes over the present, obscures it, filters it. And that past is my identity. The past is me. It's the me, therefore, as Kay puts it, that is the quintessential factor of division, because the me can only be identified with the past. If I say I'm a Jew, suppose, you see, I say I'm a Jew. It doesn't matter. I'm not taking any issue with the Jews. Say I'm a Catholic. It's much better. I avoid that problem. I'm not anti-Semitic. So I say I'm a Catholic, right? There you have it already. Being a Catholic means I fit into the pattern and definition of a tradition, traditional identity, right? But tradition is history. So I am history. My identity as a Catholic is historical, is based on the past, may have some interesting things in it, you see, some aspiration to virtue, some aspiration to goodness, some aspiration to truth. But these are aspirations. The past itself, as such, denies my goodness and my truth because it is dead, and it prevents me to relate actually directly with the present. I cannot relate if I am looking through that past. See how Krishnamurti is wiping out the whole history of mankind in terms of seeking psychological security. He says there's no such thing. And if you seek security, which is in these images, being a Catholic, having Christ on the cross, and all that kind of stuff, you will destroy life itself. You will introduce conflict and division, and therefore you will not be a Catholic. You will be not a religious person. The word Catholic means universal, because it was the universal church. But you won't be a universal human being, right? Because you are particular, and your past identity destroys that relationship. Like it destroys the relationship with your wife when you are remembering how she told you yesterday that you were a loser. Or whatever it was she said, right? She also said you're a nice person and a very nice person, and I like to be with you. So one day she says one thing and the next day she says another. And you have to filter it through to see whether this ends up on a positive note or a negative note. But division arises out of this memorization of experience and the basing of that in the me. That is where we are at. And that's what we have to question, therefore, this necessity to have an identity, which is the will to be. So there is even a deeper issue. Look how we're going. From the sense of division, creating conflict, to the images being the factors of division, which are based on the search for security, which is the identity itself. And this identity is actually based on the will to be. But for Krishnamurti, this will to be, what he calls actually becoming, the whole movement of becoming is based on something much more fundamental even, which is that human consciousness is afraid of not being, is afraid of emptiness, is afraid of death, is afraid of loneliness. So there's a fundamental fear. He proposes, and it's up to us to discuss it and see whether it has any actuality. There's a fundamental fear in humanity of not being. And as a result, a reaction, an escape from maybe even the perception. That's the question. Maybe we do perceive that we are nothing, that we are not Hindus, we are not Muslims, we are not Christians, Jews, Catholics, Protestants, communists, capitalists, Americans, Russians, and Chinese. We're nothing. We're just human beings. And even that is open to what is it, being a human being? What's this mind? Supposedly, this is the difference in this monkey is that he has a mind. What does that mean, to have a mind? Is it just to be conditioned and follow the monkey way of territoriality, hierarchy, and the everlasting competition for resources and for pride of place? That is absurd. It's our traditional conditioning. Maybe mind means precisely to contact the universal dimension, and therefore realizing that there are no separate individuals. There is one humanity, and that the difference in color of the skin makes no difference in color in being. That we're all the same color, independent of how much sun we got. I say, why my kids say, well, why are people black? I said, well, because they have been under the sun for so long that now, even if they are born in the snow, they're still colored because they're expecting to meet the same sunshine. You see, we just, and then we make all that difference, you see, and we think they are superior, we're superior, they're inferior. Oh, come on. It's absurd. Human history is full of absurdity, of false divisions and false unifications. That is the whole point. The search for truth has to understand what is false about all these divisions and also the contradictions that they generate. Therefore, they deny themselves. The purpose of security may be admirable because we do need security as human beings, as entities, as biologically, but the way we go about it undermines it. These divisions create, in fact, the greatest insecurity of all. We are now in a very difficult moment in the history of the Western world at any rate, in which there are major threats of another great war. Some of us cannot believe it, that anybody would even dare to think that. But they're thinking it, not only thinking it, they're saying it, that there could be another war in Europe at any rate between Russia and the European Union or NATO, or what do you call it, NATO. Now that would be incredibly destructive because these are major military powers. So what is going on? What's wrong with humanity? Why are we still thinking Russia, the West, this, that, and the other? It's absurd. We're all living in a planet which is going under because of our activities. We have also this war going on with nature. And whom do you think is going to win? Us? No. So never mind, we are just deluded, right? The delusions of grandeur and aspirations. But Krishnamurti points to this deeper source of division, deeper source of this whole movement, away from the truth, away from wholeness, away from the unified underlying movement of life itself, which is fear. This fear of not being, this fear of emptiness, this fear perhaps of death. What is this fear, you see? Fear means escape, is a movement of escape. So are we escaping, therefore, from a fact? As long as we're escaping, this is a major point, the major question that he throws at us. Because this is the movement of consciousness itself. It tries to creates this identity because it's running away from a fact it's trying to avoid. It cannot face. That's a major issue. If we cannot face it, then we have a deep trouble. We're all trying to become something. I have to be someone, And I have to have something to support that claim to be. Because to have is to be. You see, that's a famous psychological equation. You have power, or you have money, or you have this, or you have that, or you have knowledge. Whatever it is, you have to have something in order to be, because you're going to be something. That's why we identify with the larger, with the greater, with ideologies, with nations, with races, with traditions. You see, but all identity is with the past. At the end of the day, we know very well that we are nothing, and that there is an emptiness that we must meet, because that is at the very foundation of all reality. But we are scared stiff to face that, and there's this movement away. This movement of becoming, for K, is the fundamental mistake that human consciousness itself makes on the basis of its own thinking, its own abstraction, its own fear. And that is the fundamental factor that leads us then to identify with one thing or another that creates this conflict and bring about this pain. So, whoa, what's the root of conflict? So, as far as I can get so far in my study of good OK, is this fear of not being, the escape from what is. This is how Hubert might put it, I think, that the escape from what is the root of conflict, because it creates a division between what is and the movement away. The staying with what is for K is therefore the fundamental factor in dissolving this division, which leads to conflict. He used to say, there is no contradiction in facts. The contradiction is in escaping from the fact. So there you have it. This is the core question. So I painted the map so we can discuss it a little bit. Shall we?
Thank you, Javier. Thank you. I think very well covered. And I think you have brought a new perspective to the whole spectrum of conflict. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We can take up questions now or comments. Yes, Harshad bhai, please unmute yourself. We can't see you.
Yeah, okay. Are you able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Oh, thank you, Javier. Very, very clear. You have spoken the root of conflicts. What I understood from Krishnamurti's teachings is that there is a conflict within us, and that conflict comes because we have thinking, and this thinking comes because we have learned language and we have a memory, and then from this thinking arises that I am the thinker. And Krishnamurti said, thought creates the thinker, and then the thinker tries to change thought. And so there is a conflict within oneself, and that conflict within oneself leads to conflict with other human beings, and at a very high level also international conflicts. What I want to say is that though there are many people who call themselves Hindu or Muslims, but there is a vast difference among them. Some Hindus, they are not interested in fighting. And then there are very militant, maybe Muslims or Hindu, they are interested in fighting in the name of religion. So it seems to me that just following a religion doesn't mean that there will be conflict. One can, like Ramakrishna, was basically a Hindu, but he also worshipped as a Christian and as a Muslim. So there were no conflicts, though he had followed the tradition. So in spite of going through the traditional teachings of Upanishads or Hindu or Buddhist religion, one can come to the understanding and can really look at the source from where the conflict is arising within oneself and with other human beings. So, and also whether the division always lead to conflict, that is a question I have. We may have different opinion, but it doesn't mean that we need to fight for it. We can understand and come to some understanding about what is the truth. So my question is, does division always lead to conflict, or there is a kind of understanding which doesn't create a division, though we may have different ideas and opinions? So, okay, I have finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshad. Javier, would you like to say something on this?
Yes, I share the question to begin with. Does necessarily division lead to conflict? Because Krishnamurti says this is a law, meaning it's inevitable, that if there is division, there must be conflict. Is it a matter of a particular kind of division? Maybe he didn't specify, needs to specify. It's a psychological division, that's what I suggested, meaning if it is an identity, then there is conflict. If you really believe you're a Hindu, then you have a conflict with the Muslims. Inevitable. There's no way around it. You can think that you're peaceful and that you can very tolerant and very universalist because everything is one, but actually you can't say that. In actuality, you will not feel kindly towards your Muslim neighbors. That's why these politicians are exploiting that division and creating violence in a country that stands for peace, that stands for universal brotherhood of mankind. That's what Hinduism supposedly stands for. Every religion, in fact, stands for it. But the moment there's an identity, conflict is inevitable. That's the linchpin that I put in as a potential explanation as to why it is inevitable. If one really believes that one is a Hindu, one has a problem. Okay, but there are other people who want to talk, so I'd rather leave the space.
Thank you, Javier. I think Harshad Bhai is very clear that if there is a division, it's bound to have conflict. I think there should be no doubt about it. Now, that conflict may result in violence, that is something else. But I think Javier very rightly said that moving away from what is certainly conflict. It will create conflict. We'll go to the next question now, Dr. Pradeep Verma. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What I see today, that first question is the role of circumstances. The role of circumstances. Is it audible, sir?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. The role of circumstances in getting insight or down-to-earth approach or the appropriate approach towards life. The role of circumstances, because if quickly we see 3-4 lives, right from Buddha, who was a prince, saturated with worldly things and all that, totally, till he encountered death and suffering, disease and all that. Then Mahavir, not very much different. Then he was also a prince. Then JK, he had seen, it's a normal card sort of thing, started in very down-to-earth approach, down-to-earth living, disease, and then poverty. And then at the early age, he reached that stage when he was provided with everything, virtually everything. And everybody knows about it, that how he used to like certain things and all that. So Ashoka is another example where he was also a king, then who entered into aristocratic violence. And then when he saw death in a different way, insight came to him. Now, my question is, if I see the spectrum of desires, although universal, but it changes with the changing world change. So intensity varies, although it is universal, but still My question is whether what is also changing with the time. At that time, what is, and today's what is why it is more difficult to see things as they are with technical advancements, AI, and so many other things moving towards forced desires. You see, the market is forcing desires on you because, like a child, you see around, look around, and all colors, all designs, all patterns, and then you are trapped and you can't see deep inside because you see colorful photons are attacking us more. This eye, outside, inside is not coming because of the pressure of outside. So outside is forcing us that way. So these are the things because psychologically, initially, I don't agree that there is something psychologically different than even monkey examples are there from during evolution. It is always psychosomatic for me. It was never psychologically. Everything is so closely attached, related, simultaneous that we can hardly say. Of course, we can see in the present scenario when the psychological diseases, you see, are increasing. You see that psychiatrists are needed more than diseases of all types are there. Diseases of all types. So this domain, psychology, based on the biology, based on the material outside, it's not separate. Psychology is totally suffering these days. So we have to see whether by simply saying that this is this and the psychological is psychology, it is always psychological only. Survival instinct must be there with psychology. You see what was vulnerable that started working in that in living things, vulnerability, that security, the sense of security is there. But security, once achieved, is associated closely with the greed. You see, Javier talked about how they were invaded, how in America all the tribals were completely finished. And this thing is happening even today. So we have to see what security exactly means. What security means? Isolation cannot be secure, can never be secure. Likewise, my separateness can never be secure. This is understandable because if you are a person who reasons out, you can see and reason out, then only these things are. Otherwise, most of the people are suffering with the basic needs: food, shelter, clothing. So the psychology associated with the deprivation, and these have-nots has to be, and that is a major portion. Although we are questioning wars, Ukraine war, Russian war, but it is the same story going on in a different fashion. That's all. So things have become still more difficult now when the memes are attacking you from all sides. So we have to find out the real. Actually, if you see the best educational centers today, Aurobindo, JK's, Shantiniketan, all these things, they need a lot of money to have that environment where the mind develops freely, having well-fed people join there with a suitable support from outside. So this is the things are complicated, but if we don't see what is this is a part of what is, as I see. So unless until uh, this is what I say. This is what I say. That this is a problem. Problems have multiplied. To attain that insight, to come down to earth, we talk of appropriate technology using our local reserves, local conditions. But
Yes.
what is so very different. Thank you very much, friends. You have given me a lot of time. Thank you.
Well, as you can see, it all needs a lot of time because there's so much to cover. I mean, you just mentioned so many things, which are part indeed of this question. But anyway, I don't know that I can even address everything you address, and maybe it's not necessary because we're just sharing together and trying to get as broad a perspective of all this. So that's very important, you see. But just a couple of things maybe so that other people can join, which is that one, indeed, what we need is education. Humanity is in a barbaric state of mind. We are uneducated. We're barbarians. We are monkeys. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be insulting my own race, my own species, myself in the process. But the fact is that, you see, and therefore some people set up these schools and they don't have any money because the money, or they have very little money, they need more money because the money is somewhere else, which means that our values are wrong. We have placed our values in the wrong things. So that becomes an important thing. I used to say, where is the money? You see, when I was working for the Krishnamurti Foundations, where is the money? And the money was, I said, the money is there in football. Here in the West is in football, you see. So, and so on, in industry, in the banking and so on. But people are not thinking that actually we need to put much more attention in our values and our money, therefore, in that which is essential. And what is essential is this freedom from this egotistic movement that's creating this division in the name of security. This has not been perceived. This is what we need to do. Unfortunately, these great teachers have been voices in the wilderness, crying in the wilderness and saying, come on, wake up to the real necessities of life. What's the real work of mankind, is to be free from these factors that destroy our life, destroy the earth, and destroy one another. We are destructive. Don't you see that? That you are the factor of division, conflict, violence, war, and at every level. Isn't that the primary task, the primary challenge that humanity has? And isn't that what, as long as we remain in that fragmentary state, we'll continue to be barbarians. That's what it means to be a barbarian, is to separate, to divide, to remain in the shadow of ignorance. This is what Chaos said, and what all great teachers have said. You missed one great teacher, by the way, which was Christ. In your list, you should put him in. Just joking. But he wasn't rich at all. He was the son of a carpenter. He was perhaps an exception in many regards. He wasn't privileged at all. You see, when these people arise, and they are few and far between, they seem to have an innate truth to them and an inner protection. And I don't think it depends on circumstances. It's to do with something fundamentally inner, of a connection that they never lost with something profoundly sacred, intelligence, and good. They may be exceptions, so we don't know. Kay refused that notion that these chaps were an exception. He didn't think it was an exception because he said this is the natural way. So you see, this remains a question, and it's an open question still. I think it was even an open question for Kay as to how mankind, he said, X, this enlightened being, came from the same parents as Y, who went into the sphere of darkness, of ignorance. So how come these two were so different? And of course, they came up with this thing that mankind took a wrong turn. What's the wrong turn? Well, the teachings are trying to unfold how that was, but that is our primary task. Mankind has to take this on. As long as we're just seeking our own security, our own advancement, our own becoming, we are in the stream of sorrow. He put it very clearly, and I think there is very little doubt about it. Now that we are 60 years old and 60 plus, I think we can begin to really appreciate that mankind historically, presently, and in the future, as long as we continue on that journey, this will be the result. So it is a question for us to become aware of that challenge and to put our emphasis on what is essential, not to be distracted like the new generations are by all this media and this propaganda and technology. We are distracting ourselves from what is essential. We want new innovations here and new innovations there, but they're serving the same old destructive purposes. And in fact, they are leading us away from the essential. They are leading us away from understanding ourselves so deeply that this fear of not being is dissolved. And therefore, there is a wholeness to us. We're no longer dividing. We're no longer dividing inwardly nor outwardly. This is the real challenge. Technology they will go on about it. They even call it the iPhone. The iPhone. The I think, stands for the ego in that notion. See, they appeal to our ego. Everything is appealing to our ego. We have to drop that. That's not important. It's something else. We have to have our eyes, like Krishnamurti said, our faces turned to eternity, not to all this passing, entertaining, distracting, materialist outlook on the world. Sorry to preach, but I think it needs to be said.
Thank you, Javier. I think you have said rightly. Yes, Mr. Ravi Kaushal, please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Put on your video. Put on your video.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Unmute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Javier this started very beautifully. That the root cause of division is what he says is the search for the security in images. Really beautiful. And sir, I also appreciate that you raised the current affair of this issue of Israel and its root cause of conflict in their ideology, in their identity with the one particular thing. And the demand of security, how our mind, the root is that we all think in terms of security. So the demand of security, and then there is a division, then there is a conflict, then we think in terms of images, then there is a past, and then there is a new. So all this is, we have only one tool. That tool is, is our thought. So actually, the root cause of the function of the thought is to think in terms of security. But its main function is to, I think this brain has created this thought for its physical security, but somehow because we are not only physical, we have many psychological preferences and identification with the ideologies, and all this security funda has gone into all that field also. So this is one thing, and one thing you also bring it more deeper that this to go that this demand is there because of the fear, fear of organism as well as of psychological fear. So the K has divided these two into the psychological fear, and of course there is the body intelligence says that there must be action if there is physical fear, and then we divide it into that, and that the psychological fear we can end that somehow. I think K is more on that. So if you allow me, can I put off my this video?
I think you have finished asking. I mean, commenting. Would you like to say something?
No. Yes, sir. No, sir. I have. Please give me 2-3 more. Or anyhow, but the problem is that you have only one tool, and that is thought, and all your understanding is there, and you want to you want to understand from that tool, which is fundamentally function in terms of think in terms of security. So when you put all these what clear understanding is all that in thought, and you think that you can sort out that issue from the thought, that is, I think, is my objection is, and this the thought can, I see that this awareness thing or this seeing passively is not the function of thought. So to see the thing as it is, to see the current issues as it is, and one more thing that you said that somehow is the connect with this emptiness. So please take my word that you cannot meet emptiness because the very you is this is the limitation to meet with this emptiness. So there is no connection if you it's more subtle than the space of the mind or whatever. So and one more thing, how you listen. Suppose, for example, K has beautifully said that as long as there is division, there is conflict. So if we touch that statement as a we, so only I can do that. Only I can see that. I in every one of us can see that equation instantly, understand it instantly without using the time, and then there is no division. To see this as a fact. So when the mind thinks in terms of we, I object that. So, and you are you put all the thing and you create create emptiness and all that. Again, go into the same thought pattern, which think in terms of we, and then create another division which doesn't think in terms of that. In terms of Hindu, in terms of Israelism and all that, but you again create a division. So this is how subtle this all that thought function is. So one more thing that I think Harshad Parekh has said that there is even if there is an identity, even if I am Hindu, that doesn't mean that I am divided. I am in conflict, and I'm a bit agree with what Harshad is saying, but not from that place from where he is saying. It's like that. By being Hindu, you cannot. You are always remain in this conflict. But when you actually you are free from all the ideology, then love has love has no boundary. Then you can be Hindu, you can be Muslim, and then that doesn't create the division. But it is not from the same place from where I think Harshad is saying. So that is one thing, and
Finish it off, Ravi, because there are other people who have raised their hands.
okay, no problem, not at all. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for giving me.
Thank you, Ravi Kaushal. We'll go to Durga ji now.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I just can't switch on my, audio. I think you have to excuse me for that today.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Javier. It's a very enriching and invigorating topic, and effortlessly you had put in so many points and discussed it at great detail. I think you just to bring one gross, the subject which you have dealt, the present situation of the war between the Jews and the Palestinians and the Ukraine war. I feel as long as these things are persisting in the world, I think barbarism, it's not ended at all. Human beings, I think we that element of barbarism, I think that persists. It looks like that, and there's no end to it. And when you are talking about the Jews, I just have to, if I make it a chance to express my feelings about this Jewish condition, I feel that is the worst kind of, most horrendous and ignoble kind of act that has been done on Jews during the Second World War, all that during the Holocaust. It appalls to me that how can human beings can go to that extent of cruelty against their own race. Just because somebody is different, they haven't started anything, and somehow it's appalling for me. to that, even children, the women and the youngsters, everybody was, were forced into those camps, that. So now what the Jews are doing is they're retaliating whatever that had been done to them, though they are not justifiable. So it's ironical, and it's a preposterous to think that what kind of a inheritance we all have. Apart from that, if we come to our own daily life, about our own human existence on a personal level, if I can say that, I feel apart from having the major issues you have discussed, identity, security, and all of them being the part of the major source of conflict in our lives. But I feel it's more than anything else. The conflict happens mostly everybody wants to have their way, especially in their personal relationships, because if we have to start everything from our own daily life, the relationships in the house or in a workplace, in office, everywhere, the major source of conflict arises because of lack of understanding, and everybody wants to have their way, the ego. I think as long as that perspectives don't broaden enough, everybody can, any person can be, source of he can be the cause of conflict. He's going to have those conflicting situations in life. I feel in my own personal journey, I have understood that when somebody wants to have their way persist, then there is definitely going to be conflict in the house. And one more point I would like to add. I feel this conflict in everyday relationships or in the world, I feel that is like kind of a litmus test for all of us. That compels us to think, wonder, and then discern from, truth from the false or false from the truth, whatever it is. So, as you rightly have pointed out, there is nothing called sacred and immeasurable out there in going through these conflicting situations, in understanding them, in discerning from them. I think one starts seeing the broader picture, and that elimination of false from the truth. Maybe one starts going in a different direction. I feel conflict also is the litmus test for us. It makes us active. You can say, vibrate. So then the work also starts that way. Though it looks like, but nevertheless, I wanted to add this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Durga.
Krishnamurti used to say, conflict makes us feel alive. That's why people love a war. Careful, careful. So sorry, but I didn't mean to just to throw that in. And people are waiting to talk. So
Yes, Harshad Bhai. Please.
Yes, wars have been there in the past, like Mahabharat war. It was between dharma and adharma. And wars will continue because we cannot expect the whole humanity to be free. The spiritual teachings or Krishnamurti's teachings are meant for people who are very, very serious and who really want to go very deep within themselves to really see clearly how this conflict arising, how thoughts, feelings are arising. And only when a person is able to see all these thoughts and feelings from a source different than thinking and feeling, what Krishnamurti calls intelligence or awareness. So as long as this intelligence and awareness has not come in the life of a human being, there will be problems, there will be conflict within the family. And we talk about the bigger problems of Jews and Muslims, but even in a country like Pakistan, Muslims are fighting with Muslims in Balochistan and Afghanistan. So as long as, so what again I come back, that only very few people who are deeply interested in looking very, very carefully within oneself how conflicts arising. So for such individuals, there is a possibility of freedom from conflict, but we cannot expect or the humanity. Humanity will not change. It seems to me it will continue to fight. Okay, thank you.
Well, I keep hoping, but Krishnamurti said, "Don't hope." You should just do your work, right? I mean, it's only a natural expectation that we need to find that peace as humanity as a whole, because otherwise, okay, the few may change, but we need to change as a whole. Indeed, I mean, as things are, you are quite correct. I would agree. Now that expectation, we shouldn't be idealistic about it, but we do have to do the work. We see as clearly as we have explained so far, or the factors that are involved in this, and that is an individual responsibility, because it's at the very basis of consciousness itself. And that's each and every one of us. Consciousness is not yours or mine. Consciousness is the consciousness of mankind. And therefore, each of us has to go there, find the source, and see if we can be free from it. And maybe then we can educate the other barbarians. Sorry. Somebody else wants to say something.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Dinesh Waghmare, please.
What I feel, Mr. Javier, whole manifested world is already fragmented.
Yeah.
It has divisions. And as long as we have to face fragmentation or division, there will be conflict. Even in each man has got uniqueness which makes him separate from the others. And that is the root of conflict. That's what I feel. So as long as relationship is there, when there will be a relationship, conflict has to be there, because it's a clear give and take. And when there will be a difference of give and take or any other thing, there will be conflict. The solution is only to understand at the individual level the structure of conflict, and at a deeper level he has to understand it and then be free from it. That is the only solution. That's what my views are. What your views are?
Well, but you just said that conflict is inevitable. So why should we want to be free from anything? You don't want to be free. You cannot be free from that which is inevitable and inherent to relationship and communication.
No, one should be free from it, definitely, because why we are troubled with the conflict? Because there is a energy of disturbance, right? Or there is a problematic energy. So we can be free from it. We can understand. So there are so many things in this world which are inevitable, like falling a rain.
Like what?
But we have falling a rain or falling any other calamity, but we find a solution for it. Similarly, if at the psychological level, we can find we can understand it at a deeper level. Go at the what is Krishnamurti suggests, at the silence level, or you say that go to the consciousness level, and then we can be free from it.
So violence is not inevitable. Conflict is not. So you cannot say that where there is relationship and manifestation, there is inevitably conflict.
But as Harshad sir and you also had accepted that thing, that all people cannot have that freedom. I think they cannot reach to that freedom.
Well, this is a matter of.
But we can hope for it. We can hope for it only.
Yeah, well, Krishnamurti said, hope. The Spanish.
Hope is again not. Yeah.
The Spanish have, he who hopes despairs.
Yes.
So let's not enter into that dynamic. You see, this is despair. But look, we have raised a lot of questions. You see, I haven't even. I was trying to keep track of everything that we mentioned, and we said lots of things. And on the one hand, see, let's start from the ending and see if we can track it a little bit. That is that, all right, is conflict inevitable, right? And at what level, when is it inevitable? Because I started with Kay's famous law, right? Where there is division, there must be conflict. That is a law, meaning If this, then that, right? Like the law of gravity. This happens. But then we raise the question, is that inevitable? Like if you belong to a religion, we are a Muslim and you are a Hindu or a Catholic or a Jew, and every religion says be good, relate to others, love another, treat another like you would be wanted to be treated, right? Love your enemies. Imagine saying that. Even saying it goes so contrary to the truth, which is we hate our enemies and our enemies hate us. To respond to hate with love. Do we do that? No, we don't, generally not. Anyway, a few maybe manage to come to that point of freedom from this self-protective mechanism. Like someone said, you see, at home, the fundamental issue of conflict is because everybody wants to have their way. That's a very simple and direct observation. As long as each of us wants to have his, her way, we have conflict. So that's, again, self-interest at the basis of it all, right? And you might say, well, but that's inevitable because everybody is interested in themselves, is interested in their own pleasures, in their own security, in their own hierarchical things, right? There was a German philosopher, Hegel, who said every time two people meet, they start establishing a hierarchy between them. Now that's already conflict, you see, the superior and the inferior, that we're always measuring that way. Now, if we are intelligent enough and we can begin to understand these things and our responsibility for the whole phenomenon that we see, and that we see how destructive the whole movement is, we begin to question, therefore, this little almost, how you say, mechanical, innate, primary movement of my self-interest, right? If there's a cookie on the table, I want it for myself. If there's only one cookie and there are 3 kids, I see if I'm faster than them to get the cookie. Simple, very simple. The exploitation of another is going on. This is the principle. My own self-interest above all. Me first, you second, and that whole business is massive, what that does. That simple principle is really responsible for a massive structure of injustice, conflict, violence, exploitation in the world. I was listening to the news yesterday, and you cannot believe it. In a country like the Netherlands, which is supposedly, ruled by law, fairness, and everything is already, codified in terms of how we should treat another. For example, in the job, in the market, they get these workers from abroad, they pay them below minimum wage, which is illegal, and then they charge them extra for services that cost much less, so that these people are basically slaves of these companies. This is happening in the Netherlands. I'm not surprised it happens in other countries, and we think, oh, those are more barbarians. No, we're all barbarians, no matter how the law is. So order, freedom from conflict is not a matter of the law. It's a matter of your own understanding of the responsibility you have in relation to another, and therefore you have to drop your own self-interest. Look how difficult that is. That's why Kay used to say, the essence of corruption, society and otherwise, is self-interest. It's not that you pass the money under the table, it's self-interest. This is the key. See, this is what is happening. We have to go further, deeper. I don't accept conflict as inevitable myself. I don't accept war as inevitable because it is not inevitable. It's all evitable. It can be avoided. It can be done. I sometimes wake up in the morning and I say to myself, why is there war still today? Why do they go from one day to the next? Why isn't there an insight overnight? Somehow, the good old angels that the prophets used to see in Israel visit these mad leaders of theirs, and they say, look, hey, the other is you. The Palestinian is your brother, your sister. Why are you doing this? Why are you blinded by your own identity? So they wake up in the morning and say, stop it. We could stop it overnight if there was an insight into the way thought deceives us into thinking that we're separate. This is what somebody mentioned, and we didn't pick up on it. You see how many aspects there are, which somebody said that, you see, we want security, and thought is functioning, is aimed at that primarily. But thought itself, and that's the question, is in itself fragmentary. This is what Kay says. This is very important to pay attention to, as to whether that is inevitable, because therefore, look at another factor that someone brought in very beautifully, which was, as long as we are seeking security by means of thinking, and that seems to be a primary function of thought for survival purposes, and thought itself is fragmentary, you see, even beyond the image, if you like, that's how it creates images, which is the substance of thought. As long as we're functioning within thought in order to create security, what we're doing is creating division, because thought is divisive in itself. It's partial, it's rooted in the past. You see, the past itself is divisive because it separates us from what is, inevitably. So, wow, this challenges the whole notion of mankind finding security within that field. That's major, because then you have to question the very approach of thought. Can thought ever be the ground of security? It might help. It might, technologically might help us, and medically and so on might help. But there is something else that is primary than thought. We call it intelligence. There has to be a vision, a non-fragmentary vision of the whole, of life as a whole, of humanity as a whole, of the earth as a whole, of consciousness as a whole. This is what Kay keeps pointing to. If we don't have this vision, not the vision as an idea, but the actual perception that there is really no division between human beings. There's no division between man and nature. There's no division inwardly either, which is a much more complex issue. We didn't even address that very much, but we have to look into it, because Kay would also say we have conflict outwardly because we are at war with ourselves. So there is an inevitable interrelation between the outer conflict and the inner conflict. Why is there even an inner conflict? Is it also not that consciousness is running away from itself? There's no oneness of consciousness. And that may have to do, again, because consciousness right now is based upon thinking. And that thinking, like Mr. Dr. Parekh was saying, is actually creating this division internally as well, creating this identity. The identity is created by thought. And therefore, look at it. We put our life, we invest our life, our security in this identity. Look at how it gets, how you say it, completely delusional, right? That the whole thought is partial, is fragmented, is based in the past. Therefore, you can expect division even on that basis. But it makes it all the more powerful by creating an identity out of itself. The self is therefore a projection of thought, an identification with part of the stream of the past. Being a Hindu means belonging to, or a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, that we're talking about religion, but we talk about something else, and other factors of identity, is a history, is a tradition, is a history. We are history. Thought is the response of memory. This is a very important insight, and that it needs to be gone into very deeply, because if that's the case already, and we based our security on thought, we based it in the past, and the past can never be the source of security, because security is in relationship, and relationship is direct contact, and the past is preventing it. It's a massive diagnosis. Therefore, we have to question our identity. We have to question the self. We have to question the role of thought in life. And is there, therefore, opening to something else? This is Kay's negative approach. Find out what is not true. Find out what is divisive, and see if you can be free from that. If you can be free through insight, of course, which sees the false, there is then that wholeness emerges. Therefore, we find a different world, a world of peace, a world of affection, cooperation, intelligence, and peace. Compassion, really, at the end of the day, right? So, all right, that for now, as where we are, that sounds idealistic. All right, let's leave it. But that's what we're saying is necessary, right? To find this insight, to work along, be aware, because it's all in daily life. It's all happening every day in our relationships, at home and everywhere. This is where the division takes place. Watch out for it. Let's watch out for it. Let's see how we create division. What creates division? Why is that so inevitable or evitable? For me, it's all evitable. But we have to come to that point of seeing through the illusion of the division that we create. And that's the difficult part. But that's a challenge, and that's also the creative challenge. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Javier. I think if we accept it to be inevitable, then of course there's no flow of energy even to examine what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think you've very rightly put it up. Thanks a lot. We have come to the close of the session. Once again, on behalf of the Indore Study Circle, I thank you for being with us. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dubey sir. Thank you very much, guest speaker.
Okay. Namaste.
Please, Modak, end it now.
Okay.